Welcome, friends, to a brand new science fiction adventure. In this episode, I'll tell you the story of human pilot Andrew and alien woman Bella. Sit back and enjoy this science fiction story. Happy viewing, the alien woman said angrily. Why are you always staring at me, human? Because your eyes are so beautiful, I replied. The Meridian was not, by any reasonable definition, a good ship. She was a rectangle of stubborn alloy, roughly the shape and dignity of a shipping container that had once dreamed of being something more, and after 11 years of hauling ore, grain pods, and once, memorably, 40,000 liters of fermented Caesarean fish sauce, she had settled into a comfortable middle age of leaks, groans, and a philosophical objection to being asked to go fast. Andrew loved her the way you love a dog that has bitten you more than once. He was 93 days into a 9-month cargo run to the outer Velis stations, which meant he had long since passed the point where a human being remained fully sane and had arrived at the calmer, stranger country beyond it. By day 40, he had named the ship's systems. The air recycler was Gerald because it wheezed. The primary coolant pump was Beatrice because she was temperamental and prone to dramatic exits. The coffee machine, which produced a beverage that tasted like warm regret filtered through a sock, he called simply the enemy, and he lost an argument to it every single morning. I'm not asking for much, he told the enemy that shift, holding his mug beneath the spout with the weary faith of a man praying to a god he no longer believed in. I'm asking for coffee. You are a coffee machine. This is the core competency. This is the one thing on your resume. The enemy gurgled, produced a thin brown liquid the temperature of a mild disappointment, and fell silent. Andrew drank it anyway. This was, if he was honest, the most functional relationship in his life. The other relationship, the one he did not name, because you do not name the thing you are trying very hard not to think about, was sitting 11 feet away at the navigation console, and she had noticed him staring again. Bella was Talveth. Andrew had never worked a run with one before, and 3 months in, he had learned exactly 3 things about her people. They were extraordinarily good at moving objects through space. They considered small talk a kind of low-grade violence, and their skin was red. Not sunburn red, not embarrassed red, but a deep and living crimson, like garnet held up to a candle. And in the low amber wash of the bridge lights, it did things Andrew had never entirely gotten used to. Caught the console glow along her cheekbone, pooled shadow in the hollow of her throat, and generally conducted itself in a manner he found difficult to look away from. She had long ears, too, tapered and elegant, that swiveled a fraction toward any sound she found interesting, and he had privately, catastrophically, decided this was charming. He knew he was staring. He knew it the way you know you've left the stove on, a low background hum of doom. He looked back at his flight readout, which informed him the Meridian was proceeding through empty space at her usual pace of eventually, and there was, professionally speaking, nothing whatsoever for him to be doing except sitting there being a functioning adult. He managed this for roughly 40 seconds. "You're doing it again," Bella said, without turning around. "Doing what?" said Andrew, in the innocent tone of a man caught doing exactly the thing. "Staring." "I was reviewing There's a nav overlay on your side of the... I was checking the drift compensation." "The drift compensation is my job, on my console, which you cannot see from your seat." Her ears had gone very still, which he had learned was the Talveth equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "You have been checking my drift compensation for 3 weeks. It's a very good drift compensation," he said. "Impeccable. I like to keep an eye on excellence." And this was the moment. He would think about it later, replay it, wonder what would have happened if he'd made a joke and turned away like a sensible coward. This was the moment Bella turned. She came around in her chair with her arms already crossing over her chest, all crimson and sharp edges, the ears flattening back in a way that was unambiguous in any language, and the words came out fast and defensive and braced, clearly, for some flimsy excuse she could tear apart and be rid of. "Why are you always staring at me, human?" And Andrew, who had spent 93 days losing arguments to a coffee machine, who had run to the far edge of settled space specifically to get away from anything resembling honesty, who could have said your posture's off or you had something on your face or literally anything else, Andrew looked at her and did not look away and did not reach for a single lie. "Because your eyes are so beautiful," he said. The bridge went very still. Gerald wheezed once and thought better of it. Whatever retort Bella had loaded and chambered simply dissolved somewhere between her lungs and her lips, and the anger drained out of her face like water through open fingers, replaced by something so much more uncertain that it startled them both. A navigator who could plot a course through 1,000 stars in her sleep suddenly could not, it seemed, hold the gaze of one unremarkable man in a rectangular ship. Her ears did something complicated. She turned back to her console much too quickly, her red hands finding controls that did not need finding, and she said nothing at all. And for the rest of that shift, the silence between them was different. It was not the silence of two strangers assigned to the same tin can by an indifferent shipping company. It was the silence of two people who had, without quite intending to and certainly without permission, just admitted that 93 days into the dark, the voyage had quietly become something neither of them had planned for and that there were still 182 days left to go. Ships do not have mornings. The meridian ran on an arbitrary clock some engineer had bolted to her decades ago, and when that clock decided it was 0600, the bridge lights warmed from amber to a slightly less amber, and this was called dawn by everyone aboard, which was two people, one of whom was currently hiding. Andrew was hiding in the galley. He had been hiding in the galley for 40 minutes, which was a long time to spend in a room the size of a modest closet, and he had passed it by conducting a series of increasingly deranged rehearsals with the mop. "Morning," he said to the mop, casually, one shoulder against the bulkhead. "Sleep well?" "No, too personal. She doesn't sleep. She does the thing where her ears fold down and she goes still for 6 hours like a very judgmental houseplant." He straightened the mop's gray strings as if adjusting a colleague's collar. "Morning, just morning. Neutral, professional. Nothing happened. I did not compliment your eyes like a man in a poorly written play." The mop wisely offered no opinion. It was the second best conversationalist on the ship. The problem, of course, was that he had meant it, and meaning it had been the mistake. A lie he could have walked back, a joke he could have buried. But he had gone and said a true thing out loud in deep space where true things echo, and now he had to go stand next to it for 181 more days. Bella, for her part, was overcorrecting in the opposite direction. When Andrew finally surrendered and carried his mug of warm regret onto the bridge, she greeted him with a politeness so elaborate and starched it could have stood up on its own. "Good shift cycle, Andrew," she said, enunciating each syllable like a diplomat diffusing something. "I trust your rest interval was restorative." She had never once in 3 months inquired after his rest interval. She considered such inquiries, as previously established, a low-grade act of aggression. "It was fine," he said, restful, very interval-y. "I am pleased." She nodded, crisp, and returned to her console with the rigid focus of a woman defending a fortress. Her ears were doing the thing where they stayed deliberately, unnaturally forward, which he now understood was the enormous effort it took to not let them swivel toward him. He found this unbearably endearing and had the sense to say nothing about it, which was, for Andrew, a personal record. They passed the shift like that, two people performing normalcy at each other across 11 feet of decking, and somewhere in the long stretch of it, in the way that boredom and confinement eventually crack even the most careful defenses, they started, almost against their will, to actually talk. He learned things. He learned that Bella had come to human freight work the way driftwood comes to a beach, not by choice but by current. Her own people, the Talveth, had run survey fleets once, charting gravitational currents through unmapped space, and she had been navigator on one of them, the last and smallest of a crew of 9. The fleet had been drawn down, ship by ship, the way small proud things get drawn down by large indifferent budgets, until there was no crew and no ship and only Bella, holding a license to navigate stars nobody was paying her to chart anymore. Human shipping had needed hands. She had needed to be somewhere. "It is not the work I trained for," she said, and left the rest in the silence, where Talveth left most things. He told her, in exchange, less than the truth, but more than he'd told anyone, that he'd taken the Velis run because it was long and it was far, and both of those had been the point. That there was a version of his life back in the inner systems that had come apart in his hands, and he'd found it easier to put 9 months and several light years between himself and the wreckage than to stand in it. She listened with her ears tilted his way, and did not offer comfort, which the Talveth apparently also considered a violence. And somehow, that was the most comfortable he'd felt in 94 days. Then Beatrice tried to kill them. It began as a smell, sharp, chemical, wrong, and then a shriek from the aft compartment as the primary coolant pump, temperamental and prone to dramatic exits, chose that moment to blow a seal and begin venting superheated coolant into a corridor with great theatrical enthusiasm. Alarms woke Gerald, who added his wheeze to the chorus. "Beatrice!" Andrew bellowed, already moving. "We talked about this." And then the two of them were crammed shoulder to shoulder in a crawl space built for 1.5 people, red hands and human hands working the same failing valve, faces inches apart in the emergency light. "Left," she said. "The seal is on the left." "That's my left or your left?" "We are facing the same direction, Andrew." "People always say that, like it settles it." The valve gave, coolant hissed to a stop, and the alarms cut out one by one, leaving them breathing hard in the sudden quiet, still pressed together, neither pulling back with any urgency. "The pump did that on purpose," Andrew said. "Pumps do not have intent." "You haven't met Beatrice." He was very aware of how close she was, of the warmth of her, of the fact that her ears had at last given up the fight and swiveled fully toward him. And Bella, watching him notice, did not turn away this time. "Human bluntness," she said quietly, as if working out a navigation problem. "It is not rudeness. My people never say the thing. We feel the currents and we let them move us, and we never ever say the thing aloud." She looked at him, red and near and unguarded in the dark of the crawl space. "You just say the thing." "It gets me in trouble," Andrew admitted. "Yes," she said. And she did not move away. It was Bella who felt it first, 4 days later, which made sense, because feeling things was more or less her entire professional qualification. Andrew was mid-anecdote, a long, ill-advised story about the time he'd tried to dock at Kasari Station with a hold full of the aforementioned fish sauce and a leaking gasket, a tale with no discernible point and a smell you could allegedly still detect on the station's eastern promenade, when he noticed she had stopped listening. Her ears had gone flat and forward and rigid, angled at nothing, at a patch of empty space off the port bow, and her red hands had frozen above the console. "So the harbor master's still furious, and I'm trying to explain that technically the sauce is the cargo and the propulsion at this point, and—" "Bella, be quiet," she said, not unkindly. She said it the way you tell someone to be quiet so you can hear a sound at the edge of hearing. He shut up. On any other ship he'd have argued the point on principle, but 3 months had taught him that when a Talveth navigator went still like that, something in the fabric of space was tugging at a sense he didn't possess and couldn't argue with. "There's a current," she said slowly. "A gravitational shear. Here." She brought it up on the main display, and Andrew leaned in to look at a smear of readings that meant, to his eye, absolutely nothing, and to hers, apparently, everything. "It should not be here. There is no mass logged on any chart within 40 light hours of this position. But something is pulling. Something with a great deal of mass, and it is." Her ears twitched, hunting. "Quiet. It is hiding." "Mass doesn't hide," Andrew said. "That's the whole thing about mass. It's the one honest quantity in the universe. Everything else lies, but mass just sits there weighing the exact amount it weighs. And yet—" She overlaid the shear against their heading, and a thin red vector crawled across the display, and Andrew felt the first cold prickle at the back of his neck, the one that came before the jokes ran out. The vector bent. Their course, plotted straight and boring for the outer Velis stations, curved a fraction toward the empty patch of space that shouldn't have had anything in it. "That's a rounding error," he said, without believing it. "That is not a rounding error. That is us being pulled off course by something I cannot see." She turned to him, and there was a light in her face he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not yet, but the sharp, bright hunger of a navigator who has spent years charting stars. Nobody paid her to chart and has just been handed a mystery. I want to look at it. We're on a cargo run. The cargo is grain pods and mining resin. It will keep. It has kept for 11 years. Another day will not offend it. She was already recalculating, her hands moving with a speed that made his own piloting feel like a man fumbling for a light switch. Andrew, there is nothing on any chart out here. Nothing. And something is out here anyway, with the mass of a small moon, holding itself so still that it has hidden from every survey ever run through this corridor. Do you understand what that is? It is unmapped. It is the thing I trained my whole life to find and was told did not exist anymore. Her voice caught on the last of it, just slightly, and that catch did more to move him than the whole argument had. You want to detour toward the giant invisible mass, he said, that is actively trying to pull us in, that no one has ever survived long enough to log in an 11-year-old freighter held together by rust and my personal relationships with the coolant system. Yes. Andrew looked at her, red and lit and hopeful in the console glow, ears pricked full forward now with something that was almost joy, and he thought about the version of himself that had run to the far edge of settled space to avoid feeling anything, and how thoroughly that plan had collapsed. Well, he said, I'm not letting you go alone, and there's exactly one ship, so. He reached for the helm. Let the record show I registered an objection. The record will show it, she said. The record will also show that you smiled when you said it. He had. He hated that she'd noticed. They came about. The Meridian, who had views on being asked to deviate from a course, groaned through every seam as Andrew nosed her toward the empty dark, and for a long while there was nothing to see at all, just the sheer climbing steadily on Bella's console, the numbers thickening, the pull growing from a whisper to a hand at the small of the back. Then the stars ahead began, very subtly, to bend. Not vanish. Bend, smeared sideways into thin, bright arcs around a circle of absolute nothing, a black coin laid over the galaxy, and Andrew's mouth went dry. Bella, the stars are doing a thing. I don't like the thing. Gravitational lensing. Her voice had dropped to a hush. It is real. It is there. And then, in a different tone entirely, flat and sudden, Andrew, cut thrust. What? Cut thrust and reverse. Now. The sheer just. The current changed. It is not pulling us. It is taking us. Her hands flew. His flew. The Meridian bucked as he threw her engines into a scream of protest, and the numbers on Bella's console did not slow. They did not slow at all. And when Andrew stabbed at the comms to flag their position to any port, any beacon, any listening ear in 40 light hours, the panel gave him a single flat tone and a message he read 3 times before he believed it. No carrier. The signal, like the starlight, was bending into that black coin and never coming out. So, Andrew said very calmly, into the quiet screaming of his dying ship. On a scale of 1 to fish sauce, how bad is this? Worse, said Bella, and she reached over without looking and gripped his hand. They did not fall in, which was the good news, and they did not get out, which was all of the other news. Bella had done something in those first frantic minutes that Andrew still didn't fully understand. Read the current the way she read everything. Found the one balance point where the black coin's pull and the Meridian's dying thrust canceled to nearly nothing and parked them there in a slow, decaying orbit around the invisible thing, like a leaf caught spinning at the lip of a drain. It bought them time. It did not buy them escape. The engines couldn't break free of the pull, and cutting them meant the spiral tightened, so they held at the balance point and burned fuel they couldn't spare. And both of them knew, without saying the thing, that this was a math problem with a due date. So they waited, and they talked, because there was nothing else left to do, and because it turned out they were very good at it. Explain the years, Andrew said, some long, unmeasured while into it. The bridge lights had dimmed to conserve power, and they sat close in the low red glow, closer than the seats required. You do a thing with them. When Beatrice acts up, when the hull creaks, everyone thinks they're just, I don't know, ornamental. Ornamental. Her ears flattened in what he had learned was offense wearing the costume of amusement. They are not ornamental, human. They are how I hear the ship. Not the sound of it, the strain of it. Metal under load has a pitch. A hull holding pressure sings one note. A hull about to fail sings another. Your engines right now are singing. She paused, listening, and her face did something small and sad. They are singing a note I do not like. How much don't you like it? I will let you know when the note changes. She said it lightly, but she didn't look at him when she said it, and Andrew understood that he had just been told, in the gentlest possible Talveth grammar, roughly how long they had. He should have been more frightened than he was. He examined this fact with the detached interest of a man poking a bruise. He was going to die in a rectangular freighter at the edge of a black hole that wasn't on any map, having accomplished nothing his younger self would have recognized as a life, and the loudest thing he felt was not terror, but a kind of astonished gratitude that he was not doing it alone. I ran out here to feel less, he heard himself say. Did I mention that? That was the plan. Take the longest, emptiest run I could find and just go quiet inside. And instead, I found the one person in the galaxy who feels everything, literally, as a professional service. It is a poor emotional strategy, Bella agreed. Fleeing feeling on a ship with a Talveth aboard. It is like fleeing water by boarding a submarine. Nobody warned me. I am warning you now, retroactively. She turned toward him then, red and near and unhurried, and the careful distance they'd both been maintaining for 100 days had simply stopped mattering, burned off like the fuel. Unaffordable. My people do not say the thing, she said quietly. We have lived our whole history letting the currents move us, and never once naming where we were going. It is safe. You never have to be wrong about a feeling you have not spoken aloud. And then a human sat 11 feet from me and looked at my eyes and said the thing, on the first try, like it cost him nothing. It cost me plenty. I hid in the galley with a mop for 40 minutes. And I have been unbalanced ever since. Do you understand? I navigate by balance. It is the one thing I do not lose. And you took it from me with one sentence about my eyes. She was very close now. So I am going to try the human thing. Just once. I am going to say the thing before the note changes, in case I do not get to say it after. Her ears were full forward, trembling slightly. Every defense laid down. I did not want to be found by anyone, and then I was found by you, and I would not trade this, dying in a rusted box at the edge of nothing. I would not trade it for a safe life anywhere else, because you are in it. That is the thing. That is the whole of the thing. Andrew, who had said the thing so easily the first time, found that when it mattered most he could not speak at all. So he did the human thing back, reached across the last of the distance and kissed her, red and warm and near, in the dim glow of a ship that was singing a note neither of them liked. And for a while the math problem with a due date could wait, because some things you do not want to be doing alone, and this had become the first of them. It was Bella who broke it eventually, because the note changed. She stiffened, ears snapping flat, and Andrew felt it too. A shudder run through the deck, a groan from somewhere deep in the meridian's spine, a new pitch in the engine's scream. The balance point is moving, she said, already turning to her console, the navigator surfacing through the woman. The pull is not constant. It pulses. I should have seen it pulse. Bella, what does that mean? She ran the numbers. He watched her run them again, watched her face close like a hatch. It means, she said, that the balance will not hold much longer, and there is only one way out of a well this deep. She brought up a schematic of the meridian and highlighted a point on her outer hull. The auxiliary thrust coupling, exterior, unreachable from inside. We slingshot. We use its own pull to throw us clear. And to do that, someone has to manually free that coupling. Out there. By hand. Andrew looked at the little highlighted point on the outside of his dying ship and then at her, and the jokes, for once, did not come. The argument took 9 minutes, which was 8.5 minutes longer than they had to spare, and both of them knew it, and neither could stop. "It's my ship," Andrew said. "I know that coupling. I've cursed at that coupling. I go out. You cannot fly the slingshot from outside the hull, and I cannot fly it at all. If you are on the coupling, no one is at the helm, and the maneuver fails, and we die anyway, only stupider." Bella's voice was flat and fast, the navigator overriding everything softer. "The one who frees the coupling has 30 seconds to get back through the airlock before the burn. The one at the helm has to time a slingshot around a well that pulses by feel in the dark with no margin. Andrew, which of those is you, truly? Which of those can you do that I cannot?" He had no answer because there wasn't one, because she was right, and being right at a moment like that is a cruel thing to be. He could fly. He could not feel the pulse of an invisible mass in his ears. She could. The division of labor had been decided the day their species evolved down different roads, and no amount of loving her was going to renegotiate it now. 30 seconds, he said. 30 seconds. That's not a lot of seconds. It is enough seconds. I have counted worse. She was already pulling on the suit, red hands moving through the seals with a calm that he understood now was the most frightened she had ever been. He helped her with the helmet. His hands were not calm. "The note," she said through the faceplate, "will tell you when. You will not hear it. But the ship will lurch when the pull peaks, and 3 seconds after the lurch, the trough comes. And that is your window. You burn on the trough, not before, not after. You will want to burn early. Do not. 3 seconds after the lurch. After the lurch. Say it back. After the lurch. Burn on the trough." He caught her gloved hand at the airlock, and there was so much to say, and no grammar built to hold it, human or Talveth. So he said the only thing that fit. "Come back inside. That's the thing. Come back inside. That's the whole of the thing." Her ears, invisible now inside the helmet, did something he couldn't see but could imagine. "I am going to try the human strategy," she said. "I am going to say it before, in case." And then the inner door sealed, and the outer door opened, and Bella went out into the black. He flew back to the helm with his heart going like a failing pump, and put his hands on the controls and did not look at the exterior feed, because if he looked at the exterior feed, he would watch her instead of the numbers, and watching her would kill them both. So he watched the numbers. The shear climbed. He talked to the ship. "Come on, old girl. One good throw. You've hauled fish sauce across 3 systems. You owe me 1 good throw." Gerald wheezed encouragement. On the comm he could hear Bella breathing, and the small grunts of effort as she fought the coupling, a locking ring 11 years rusted, out there at the edge of a thing that bent starlight. "It is seized," she said. "The coupling is seized. Hit it. It responds to violence. It's the only language it speaks. It learned from Beatrice." A clang came through the hull, transmitted up through metal, and another, and Bella swearing in a language he didn't know but understood perfectly, and then the shear on his console spiked and the whole ship lurched, a great sick heave as the invisible well pulsed to its peak, and Andrew's hand jerked toward the burn, and he hauled it back because not before. And he started counting. 1. On the comm, a grunt, a final clang, the coupling free. 2. "It's loose, Andrew, it's loose. The tether's fouled. My tether is." 3. The trough came. He felt it, God help him. Felt the pull go slack for one held breath, and every animal instinct in him screamed, "She's still out there." And he did the hardest thing he had ever done in his life, which was trust her. And burn, the Meridian screamed. She screamed like she was tearing in half, the slingshot flinging her out of the well on a curve so tight the hull shrieked, and Gerald's wheeze climbed to a whistle, and something aft blew with a bang, and the stars ahead unbent, snapping back from smeared arcs into honest points of light, and the black coin fell away behind them and let go. They were clear. They were clear, and the comm was silent. "Bella." Nothing. Bella, say the thing. Anything. Say a thing. He was already out of the seat, already at the airlock, slamming the cycle, and the outer door had not sealed. It hung a foot open, the tether trailing through it taut and then slack, and his stomach dropped through the deck. He hauled the tether hand over hand, and it was heavy. It was heavy. And then a red glove closed over the airlock lip from outside, and then another, and Bella dragged herself in over the sill, suit scored and helmet fogged and one leg not working right, and collapsed against him in the small metal room while the door finally, mercifully, sealed. "The tether fouled," she gasped, faceplate against his chest. "I unclipped it. I said the thing first. Into the comm. You did not answer. I didn't hear it. The ship was screaming." "Then I will say it again," Bella said. "On the ground, indoors, not dying." And she pulled off the helmet, red and alive and furious with relief, and said it. The meridian limped, which was an improvement on screaming, and Andrew had learned in 11 years to be grateful for improvements. Something aft had blown in the slingshot and taken a quarter of their thrust with it, so they came home slow on a long, shallow curve toward the outer Velas stations, at a pace the ship found dignified and Andrew found agonizing, and neither of them minded very much because slow meant alive, and alive was the whole of the thing. Bella's leg was broken, a clean break, she informed him, with the clinical calm of a woman who had catalogued worse injuries in the survey fleet, and Andrew said it with the med kit and a great deal of unsolicited commentary, and she bore both with the patience of a saint tolerating a particularly devoted fool. "You are enjoying this," she accused as he splinted it. "I am enjoying that there is a leg to splint," he said. "That's a very different thing from enjoying the splinting. I want that on the record." "The record," she said, "is going to be a strange document." They spent the long, slow days after cataloging the wreckage, the ship's and their own. Gerald had survived, wheezing, immortal. Beatrice, temperamental to the last, had actually held through the whole ordeal, which Andrew took as a personal apology and chose to forgive. The enemy still produced warm regret, because some things are constants of the universe, and in the hold 40,000 grain pods and a load of mining resin sat entirely undisturbed, having slept through the most dangerous hour of their lives, which struck Andrew as the correct attitude for cargo to take. But there was the other wreckage, too, the older kind, and it was Bella who made him look at it, in her way, which was to say she said nothing, and simply let the silence get large enough that he had to fill it. "The life I ran from," he said finally, one dimmed shift cycle, her splinted leg across his lap. "You've never asked what it was. You will say the thing when you are ready. You always do. It is your one talent." Her ears tilted toward him, patient. So he said it. Not a tragedy, in the end. No grand catastrophe. Just the ordinary humankind. A life he'd built with someone that had quietly come apart. A version of himself he hadn't liked and hadn't known how to stop being. So he'd done the coward's brave thing and put 9 months of empty space between himself and all of it. "I thought the distance would fix me," he said. "Turn me down. Make me quiet." He looked at her, red and near and real. "And instead I flew straight at a black hole because you wanted to see it, and said the thing about your eyes because it was true, and unclipped every safety line I had. Distance didn't fix me, Bella. You did, by being the opposite of quiet." "I did not fix you," she said. "You were not broken. You were only holding your ears forward too long, refusing to let them turn toward anything. It is exhausting. I have done it my whole life." She reached up and touched his face with a red hand. "We are both very tired people who were pretending not to feel the current, and then the current took us anyway. It always does." The Talveth, it turned out, had a word for what the black coin had been. A Veth core, a drowned mass, a thing that had fallen so far out of the light that even the charts forgot it. Bella's survey fleet had chased rumors of them for years and found none, and been drawn down and disbanded for the failure. She logged it now, all of it, the shear readings, the pulse, the lensing, the exact coordinates of the thing that no one had ever survived long enough to record, And when they finally raised the Velis beacon, and the comm crackled back to life, the first thing she transmitted was not a distress call, but a discovery. A full navigational record, the find of a career flung out into the dark for anyone who came after. "It is charted now," she said, watching the transmission go. "It cannot hide from the next ship. I did the thing I trained my whole life to do." Her ears were forward, and for once it did not look like effort. "The fleet drew me down for finding nothing, and I found it anyway. Just late, and with better company." They came into Velis Station on a Tuesday, or the arbitrary thing the station clock insisted was a Tuesday, and the harbor master took one look at the scored hull and the venting and the two people on the bridge and asked what in the deep black had happened, and Andrew opened his mouth to explain and found that on a scale of 1 to fish sauce, there was simply no grammar for it. So he said, "Long run," and left it there. The question they had both been not saying waited for them at the airlock, the way it had waited the whole voyage home. What happens when the voyage ends? A human pilot and a Talveth navigator, pulled to different stations by the same indifferent budgets that pulled everything, the galaxy's oldest current. They stood at the open hatch, station lights spilling in, and neither moved to go through it. "I do not want a safe life somewhere else," Bella said. "I said that at the bottom of the well, and it is still true up here, in the light, not dying. That is how I know it is real. My people never say a thing twice. I am saying it twice." "There's a whole galaxy of runs," Andrew said. "Long ones, empty ones. Terrible ships held together with rust and personal relationships." He held out his hand. "I don't want to fly them quiet anymore, and I don't want to fly them alone." "Then we take the next one," she said, "together. And we say the things out loud, both of us, before the note changes. Every time. That is the whole of the thing." And she took his hand and stepped through the hatch with him, splint and all, into the light. Later, much later, another ship, another endless dark, a better coffee machine that Andrew still didn't trust. He would catch her watching him across the bridge, red skin caught in the console glow, ears tilted his way, unhurried, unhidden, and when he asked her why, she would not turn away, and she would not reach for a lie. "Because your eyes are so beautiful," Bella would say, and she would mean it on the first try, like it cost her nothing at all. The universe is very good at pulling things apart. Budgets and distances and the long, indifferent currents of ordinary life draw people down, ship by ship, feeling by feeling, until we learn to hold our ears forward and pretend we sense nothing at all. It's safe, that pretending. You never have to be wrong about a thing you never said out loud. But Andrew ran to the edge of everything to feel less, and found more waiting there than he'd left behind. And Bella, who had spent her whole life letting the currents move her in silence, learned to say the thing twice, out loud, in the light, not dying. So let me leave you with the question they had to answer at the bottom of a well that bent starlight. What is the thing you have not said out loud? The truth you're holding your ears forward against, exhausted, certain the distance will one day make it quiet. And who is sitting 11 feet away from you right now, waiting, not for a lie, not for an excuse, but for you to simply look at them and not turn away? The current is going to take you anyway. It always does. The only choice you ever really get is whether you say the thing before the note changes. The end. We've reached the end of another story, friends. Don't forget to hit the like button below and leave your thoughts on the story in the comments. Subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler so you don't miss the next story. See you in the next one.